Jerusalem a week before that Easter Sunday, or the Passover festival was going on in the city. At the time, it was the busiest week of the year in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the ancient capital of Israel, this incredible city. It was the location of the utterly amazing Temple of Solomon, which was ginormous, absolutely huge temple. And for people who normally lived in tiny little houses, this temple was like just incredible. It was like nothing else they would have seen just by its sheer size. It was epic in its proportions. It still would, if it was there today, it still would be an absolutely huge building, even by our standards today. And King Herod the Great, who was the king when Jesus was born, and then his son, Herod Antipas, who kind of became this kind of puppet king at around the time of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. Those guys made the most of the temple financially. They really wrung out every single little bit of money they could out of it. They turned it into this kind of pilgrimage, tourist attraction, theme park kind of thing going on. So before Herod the Great, people who were Jewish around the world would send money in to the temple, but Herod really just made it this place of pilgrimage. He made it so that you came to it personally. So people would be coming from all over the world to come and visit the Temple of Solomon. So the city was absolutely packed on this week. Tens of thousands of people in the crowd. That's not necessarily the crowd on the day, but just in case you were struggling to remember what a crowd looked like, that's there for you. It was like thronging. Is that the word I want to use? I don't know. With people. Absolutely thousands of them everywhere. It was like Maisie Day, but on steroids. People would be renting out rooms to the pilgrims, selling food on the streets. There'd have been like all the smells of cooking everywhere. There would have been live animals everywhere. They were ready for the sacrifices. So there were like lambs bleating all over the place, birds kind of squawking everywhere. All of this kind of hubbub going on. And into this melee of noise arrives Jesus. And after 3 years of ministry with all sorts of amazing miracles going on and healings and rumors around him would be sort of abounding as this Jesus arrives in the city of Jerusalem. Who is this man? What's he going to do? What's going to happen now? And his arrival in Jerusalem this week is recorded in all four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But I'm going to read it today from Mark's account. So here we go, Mark chapter 11 this is, and verse 1 onwards. It says, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage and Bethany up the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you'll find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you why you're doing this, say, the Lord needs it, and we'll send it back here shortly. They went and found a colt outside in the street, tied at a doorway, and as they untied it, some people standing there asked, what are you doing untying that colt? They answered as Jesus had told them to, and the people let them go. When they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks over it, he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, while others spread branches they'd cut in the fields. Those who went ahead and those who followed shouted, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Jesus entered Jerusalem and went to the temple courts. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. It's a well-known scene. Jesus doesn't walk into the city, but he rides into the city on a donkey. And as he does, people wave palm branches, and they lay palm branches down on the floor. That's why we call it Palm Sunday. Some of the people took their cloaks off, and they lay them down on the floor as well for the donkey to walk on. And you can imagine how busy the streets are, these tiny little winding, cobbled city streets in this ancient city, packed with people. And then Jesus arrives on this donkey, and the street's kind of parting a little bit, the crowds are parting, and there's a bit of jostling as he comes through. Jesus is on the donkey, though, so he's higher. Everyone can see him as he passes through. And Matthew, who also records this, and Matthew's always keen to make sure we understand the Jewish significance of it. Matthew tells us this is to fulfill an Old Testament prophecy. Zechariah said hundreds of years ago, he said, see your king comes to you gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. this is your king on a donkey. He's a gentle and humble king. If you were to keep reading Zechariah beyond what Matthew quotes, you'd see that the king riding on a donkey was coming to proclaim peace and freedom, not war. And as he comes through the crowd, they shout, Hosanna. That means save or salvation. It was a term of praise and worship. Still is today. We've sung it already this morning. Hosanna. It's an act of worship. And as Jesus makes his way through these streets up to this huge temple complex, the people are literally shouting their worship. That's the word that's recorded. They shouted. They're shouting for Jesus to save them. They're shouting that he's come from God. They're shouting that the kingdom of God is coming. It's not an angry shout. It's a happy shout. It's jubilant. The atmosphere is positive. It's hopeful. They want a savior. They want a Messiah. They want someone who's going to save them and set them free. They want peace. They want him to be their king. And as he passes through, more and more people would be joining this crowd, because that's what crowds do, isn't it? They sort of sweep people up. There'd have been loads of people who didn't even know why they were in the crowd. They didn't even know what they were shouting about, because later on Matthew says, well, actually there was a stir in the city and everyone was like saying, who is this? There would have been like people in the crowd shouting, Hosanna, who's this again? Like, because that's what happens with crowds. So that's Sunday, and it's a happy day. But then things go in a bit of a different direction over the next few days, because Jesus comes to the temple, and instead of going on a nice sightseeing tour like everybody else was doing, he storms through the temple courts, and he overturns the tables, and he chucks people out, and he throws the money changers around, and he sets all the animals going all over the place, the animals ready for sacrifices. Remember, they're live animals at that point. They haven't been sacrificed yet. So there's like birds going everywhere, there's lambs all over the place. It's like crazy stuff going on. It's not the party atmosphere that everybody wanted. And then he preaches really hard stuff about the end times, and he curses a fig tree and does all sorts of stuff. And then we get to Friday morning, just 5 days later after the entry on the donkey. And we read this. Very early in the morning, this is Mark 15, very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Are you the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate. You've said so, Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of. But Jesus still made no reply. And Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who'd committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. Do you want me to release you, the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to get Pilate to release Barabbas instead. What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews? Pilate asked. Crucify him, they shouted. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Just 5 days ago, there was a crowd shouting, Hosanna! Woohoo! And now they're shouting, crucify him, kill him, murder him. And when Pilate says why, they just get louder. And they get louder again. Crowds are fascinating. Crowds are loud. They're compelling. They sweep people up with them, even those who don't know what's going on. And we all think that we're not susceptible to being swept up by a crowd, but it happens to everyone. We all so easily get swept along by a crowd. That's why we all kind of wear the same clothes and listen to the same music and go to the same things and eat the same food, because we get swept along by the crowd. And crowds can be fickle. They can change their mind quickly. They can change their direction quickly. You know, like you've seen the murmuration of starlings. Have you seen that? Like when they're all zipping around and suddenly they all just change direction. Like no one's organized it. It wasn't like a lead starling going this way. They just seem to all do it suddenly. It's like that with crowds. And I'm not saying that the people on Friday morning were the exact same people who were there on Sunday. It's not that they were necessarily the same people. That's unlikely. There were thousands in the city. But it is a reminder that one day crowds can say one thing, and a few days later, or the next day even, crowds can say another thing. And no one would even notice the change of direction. There's a lot of crowds in our world today making a lot of noise, isn't there? Social media kind of shouts at us. It demands our attention. It shapes our thoughts and our opinions. It sweeps us along with a crowd without us even realizing. Entertainment shouts and vies for our attention. There's all these things saying, watch me, shouts at us. Politicians shout. They demand that we agree with them and that action is taken, that theirs is the only way that's right. Advertising shouts and it thrusts products in our face and says, look, you need this. You didn't even know you needed it. And you're like, oh, yeah, too right. I need that. And we buy it. And sometimes the same people who shout one thing one day, the next day or a few days later, can be shouting the exact opposite, and it gets really confusing. And if you question it, the shouting just gets louder and louder. It can be exhausting after a while. But in between these two crowds of shouting, in between this crowd shouting Hosanna and this crowd shouting crucify him, a small, quiet moment takes place. It's between Jesus and a woman called Mary. Not Mary, his mother. This is Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. Not long before Lazarus had died and Jesus had raised him from the dead. English was never my strong point. And there's a moment between Jesus and this Mary. And it's recorded in John. Let me just read 3 verses for us. 6 days before the Passover, there's a little bit of confusion as to where exactly it falls. Mark puts it in the middle. But Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about half a litre, or a pint, of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. There's something beautiful that goes on here. In an act of silent worship, Mary comes and she pours perfume on the feet of Jesus. She doesn't say anything. She just comes and silently worships him. She ignores the noise of all the crowds around her. And she comes, and you can see some things she does. She comes and she sacrifices. Like worship always takes sacrifice. This was a pint or half a litre of expensive perfume. This would have cost her something, and worship always costs something. Maybe it costs time, maybe it costs energy, maybe it costs choices and decisions, maybe it costs pride. Sometimes it even costs money, but it always costs something. And she's humble as well. I mean, this is like a really humble act, isn't it? She comes in and she don't just pour it on his feet. That would be humble enough. But she then wipes his feet with her hair. Now, I'm guessing she had longer hair than me, so maybe she wasn't, I'd have to be really close to his feet. But it's a humble act, isn't it, as she comes and she does this thing. She positions herself lower than Jesus. She really places herself low and puts him above. She makes sure that he is the one who's elevated. He's the one on the throne. That's what worship's all about, isn't it? It's why we sing. It's why we raise our hands. It's why we kneel. All of it is an act of humility before the Lord, of lifting him up, of repositioning him on the throne, of saying, you are the Lord, and if he's the Lord, then I'm not the Lord. I'm not in charge. She's focused as well. You see, the moment she starts to pour the perfume, then all the noises around start going on, don't they? Like the others start, if you read the rest of John 12, you'll read that others start to moan and mutter and object, and opinions start coming in and they criticize her. Some people say, well, that's too extravagant. You shouldn't be doing that. You're wasting that perfume. Some say, well, that money could have been spent on helping the poor. Everyone has an opinion, but she just ignores them and she just focuses on Jesus and her worship. And I find it fascinating that her act of worship then has a much wider impact. Because if you were to continue to read on, you'd find that the smell or the fragrance of the perfume fills the whole room. It fills the whole room. It was like her worship went further than just that one moment. It affected everyone else. I reckon everyone in the room went home with a slight whiff of perfume that day because it had been so strong in the room. And that's what a person who's lost in worship does. They leave a bit of residue. They leave a bit of fragrance with those around them. They change others. They rub off onto others. And actually, Mary's impact is even bigger than that, because when Mark tells this story, Mark 14, he records Jesus saying this. He says, "Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." And we're doing that today. We are remembering her act of worship, and it's impacting us. You see, in the middle of these two crowds, of one shouting, "Hosanna, salvation, save," and one shouting, "Crucify, murder, kill," comes this small, quiet, still act of sacrificial, humble, focused worship. I don't know about you, but I find the crowd quite wearisome after a while. Like, it's tiring, isn't it? This noise that's just constantly battering against us. Some of it from people we know, and some of it just through media and other things. This constant battering of noise. And I want to come to Jesus today. And I want to block all of that out. And I want to come and just worship him. And I want to just come before him. So I want to ask us to do that today. I want to ask us to come into his presence, to come before him and to worship him now, and to do it in quiet to start with. We'll do it in song afterwards. But just to come quietly before him, and maybe this is new for you, maybe you've never done this before. Well, why don't you try it today? Why don't you come before him and just offer him some words of worship, your words. Just offer him some praise. Ask him to speak to you, to show himself to you. Ask him to come to you today as you come to him. Maybe you're an experienced worshipper today. Well, let's come to him again and just sit before the Lord, sit with him this morning. We're not very good quiet, are we? Particularly in Pentecostal churches. I was reading something in a book the other day. There was an experiment, I think it was in America. People were asked to come and sit in a room silently for 15 minutes and just be silent. But in the room was a button, and they were told that if you press that button, you'll get an electric shock. And 67% of men pressed the button. 25% of women did. In other words, we're rubbish at sitting and doing nothing. We want to do something. What do we want to do? Even if it's going to hurt us, we want to do something. But I think God calls us sometimes just to sit with him in quiet, in stillness, in these small moments. And maybe this morning he'll speak to us, but actually that's not the primary reason for doing it. He might speak, he might give a word, but that's not really why we seek him. We come before him just to be in his presence and just to worship him. I'm not asking you to empty your minds. I'm asking you to fill your minds with God. Maybe you need to focus on a scripture this morning just to give you a little bit of focus, because our 21st century minds are all over the place. Sometimes you have to bring it down to a scripture, maybe a worship song, maybe an experience that you've had with God before, and you just need to come back and just say, "Oh, Lord, I remember that. Can I have that again?" And just to come before him and into his presence. So we're going to have a few moments of quiet, of silence. And while we're doing this, inevitably, something crazy will happen, in that, like, someone's phone will ring. One of the kids will shout something really funny. Somebody will trip over, right? It always happens. But let's try and stay focused on the Lord this morning. You can close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open, you can sit, you can kneel, you can stand, you can lie. Hey, you got the room this morning because you're in the early service. You've got more space. Lie down if you want to. But let's just come and spend a few moments in quiet before the Lord.